So let's take a look at a specific example of using threads and where threads are beneficial. A web server is a really good example of where threading is very helpful. Imagine what would happen if your web server didn't have threads. Imagine what would happen if multiple clients connected from their browser to your web page and it was all processing it on one thread. That would mean that every single time that a page was going to be served or something was going to happen on the server, it would all be sequential. So we would all have to get in a line in order to get our pages or get information processed from your web server. Now contrast this with how most web servers are implemented, being multi-threading. In this case, what happens is, it is kind of like going to a bank and you have multiple tellers and each one can go to a different teller. So you might be able to process 5 customers at a time and you can keep on going and going, whereas when you had the single threaded application, if you had a single threaded web server, you would have just one teller in a really long line. So that's really a good example, a good reason to use threads, and without threads a web server really wouldn't be very possible. Let's look at another example here. This example I have just called it responsive UI, and I'm sure you have seen this a lot of times. If you have ever had an application where you went to click a button or do something and then the whole UI froze, this can be a frustrating experience for a user, especially if you have some kind of long-running data operation that they have initiated through the UI and then you froze the UI and they can't do anything else, because maybe they could do something else on your application or even resize a window, but because your application is running on a single thread and it's blocking, it's using that UI resource, it is going to create that freezing effect. So another good example of using threads is to make a responsive UI. And if you want to have a UI where the user is able to do some operation and then continue to use the user interface, you're going to have to use some form of threading in order to accomplish that.